so I finally saw Deadpool and Wolverine, and this was definitely interesting because it wasn't until very recently I finally saw the other Deadpool movies, and I guess I should say, the first one I thought was a fun time, nothing amazing, but still it was funny, characters was likable, overall entertaining movie. The second one I thought was better. I think the comedy was a bit stronger in the first one, but that one definitely had better emotion, better characters, more interesting story. It was just an overall better movie. And now we finally got this one, which seems to be getting some pretty mixed reception. I've seen a decent amount of people say they didn't like it that much, or it was fine, but overall not that great, so I'm kind of surprised at how much I enjoyed this movie. I will say, I do still think the second one is the best, but I at least like this movie better than the first one. I had a genuinely really good time with it. At the very least, this movie has one of the strongest openings of the MCU, because good God, this honestly might be my favorite opening credits sequence I have ever seen in my life. I won't say what it is specifically, though. You've probably seen, like, some images or, like, screenshots or whatever of it going around, and it's pretty understandable when you actually saw the movie, because me and the audience were just howling with laughter. It was absolutely brilliant. But like the other Deadpool movies, it starts out with some sort of scene, and then we get a flashback showing how he got to that scene, you know, the classic. So, you're probably wondering how I got here, but anyway, so the main premise of this movie is that Deadpool is just living his life, you know, going about his business, when suddenly he is contacted by the TVA. I forget what specifically that stands for, but I know it's a thing that was introduced in Loki. Basically, they are bringing him in and hoping to make him enter the MCU's world because, you know, he was part of the X-Men movie, so he was part of a different universe, but they lost their anchor being, because well, spoilers for a 7-year-old movie, the movie Logan, Wolverine died at the end, and he was that universe's anchor being, and without it, the universe slowly starts to fade away, and eventually it is just completely destroyed. However, this is not supposed to happen for thousands of years, but the guy who was in charge of watching that universe as it dissolves, because I guess they need to have it monitored or whatever, didn't want to wait that long, so he winds up building a machine designed to speed up the process, and they brought Deadpool in because he's prominent, so they figured he'd be able to help in the main MCU. I blanking on what they prefer, the ideal timeline or perfect timeline, I think it's what it's called. I don't remember, it's not really important. Either way, Deadpool, understandably, doesn't like this. He is not too thrilled about everyone he knows and loves dying, so he decides to steal one of the watches that the TVA uses to find Wolverine and try and get him back, but of course, since his universe is Wolverine is dead, he begins going to other universes to find a different Wolverine to essentially take his place. Eventually, he does so, and that brings him back, but it turns out the one he selected was apparently the worst Wolverine known to man because he let everyone in his universe down. So instead, the TVA just decides to throw him in like this kind of trash world where a bunch of like rejected characters are sent, like people they don't want to have to deal with, and one of the most important ones being Cassandra Xavier, who is Charles Xavier's twin sister, and I just want to say she is a very, very interesting villain. I'll get a bit more into her later, but either way, they have to deal with her while also finding a way to escape, destroy the TA's machine, and save Deadpool's world, and Wolverine just goes along with it because Deadpool says, as he puts it, an educated wish that they'll be able to fix the issues that Wolverine caused in his universe. So right off the bat, I'm just gonna say I have not seen any of the old X-Men movies aside from Deadpool and Deadpool 2. So this is the first time I've actually seen Hugh Jackman as Wolverine in a feature film. Like, I've seen clips and stuff, but I haven't actually seen the full movie. And yeah, it's kind of easy to see why he's stuck around for all these years because he just nails it. And again, I'm not too familiar with the other movies, but I can at least tell he is playing a different version of Wolverine than he did in those old films. He's very bitter, he's very jaded, he doesn't really want to help, he just wants to be able to get home and potentially fix his mistakes. And I think that's a really interesting idea. Both him and Ryan Reynolds have fantastic chemistry together. The contrast of Wolverine, you know, being very cynical, very aggressive, whereas Deadpool's much more comedic and lighthearted, works really well, both from a comedic standpoint and a dramatic standpoint. All in all, I do think this is a very, very funny movie. I got a lot of laughs out of it. I think it honestly might be the funniest of the 3 Deadpool movies, and I really do like seeing the connection between Deadpool and Wolverine that they slowly form over the course of the adventure. That's really fun to watch. The trash world they have to explore is also very interesting. Admittedly, visually, it's not hugely crazy, but they do have some fun ideas, and there are a lot of cameos from other Marvel characters, some of which are from previous movies, not just X-Men, but also a few other ones. I won't give away too much, and as well as some new ones that I know were possible possible, but didn't end up actually happening. And I know a lot of people criticize some of the cameos in other superhero movies. Like, I know No Way Home did it perfectly, but I didn't see Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. I've heard a lot of people weren't too thrilled with those. This one, I think, works, because has a good balance of both funny ones, but also ones that actually contribute to the story. Like, a lot of them aren't just, hey, look at that, that's neat. Like, again, they have some sort of purpose, either getting a great laugh or actually contributing to the main goal, which I really liked. Cassandra is also a really good villain. She's just despicably evil. She is one of the creepiest villains the MCU has ever given us, because, like Xavier, like Charles, she can read people's minds, but the way she does it is really creepy. She literally reaches her hands, like, through people's head to touch their brains. Yeah, it is legit really unsettling. This is the first R-rated movie the MCU has given us, and yeah, it definitely earns that rating, both from that, the gore, and apparently this movie uses the F-word exactly over 100 times. And yeah, I definitely can see why. They finally can get away with it. There was one in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, so now they can finally just go all the way with it, and yeah, overall, it's a pretty fun time. Much like the previous films, this movie has an amazing soundtrack. It uses a lot of pre-existing songs. Like, I think if you've heard anything about the movie, you know the opening credits uses Bye 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 by NSYNC, which, again, is just hilarious, but there's also a bunch of other great ones, and much like the previous Deadpool movies, they work really well. They are good songs, but a lot of them do actually contribute, like, to the story and the themes and what's going on and stuff, and I think it works really well. Also gotta say, even as someone who never saw the previous X-Men movies, it is still really awesome to finally see Hugh Jackman as Wolverine wearing the actual Wolverine costume. Like, because, of course, they made a lot of jokes about how in the early X-Men movies seemed almost, I guess, kind of ashamed to be a superhero movie. Like, instead of using the more comic-accurate costumes, pretty much everyone was just wearing black leather and stuff. But this one, they're finally going all the way. Yes, they do make a lot of jokes about that, because it is Deadpool after all. He breaks the fourth wall quite a bit. And yeah, it's really cool to finally see him there, both in the full suit and also he does don the mask later on in the film, which is great. And it led to those absolutely amazing Xbox controllers that I'm sure you've seen running around, and that great popcorn bucket. If I had any issues with this movie, I will say there are two problems. One, it's not very emotional. Like, Deadpool does have a small arc that he goes through, but it's definitely nowhere near as drastic as the second one or even the first one, and that's mainly why I still think the second Deadpool movie is the best, because that one definitely had a good balance of both comedy, but also having some real heart to it, whereas this one, it works. Like, the story is fine, but again, it doesn't really have super complex morals or themes or whatever. It's not hugely emotional. It works well enough, but it's nothing amazing. And the other is, it weirdly feels a lot longer than it actually is. This movie is barely 2 hours long, but it feels quite a bit longer, and that's mainly because they pretty much have 3 climaxes. The climaxes themselves, I guess this is a mild spoiler, but basically they have one in the trash world or whatever, one where they escape and have another big action sequences, and then there's still another one after that, which again isn't as action-packed as before, but it still feels like a climax, and that just really feels like it goes on longer than it should be. Like, what we actually have is entertaining, but I do think it was a little overkill having the movie feel like it start to wrap up 3 times. But even with those, I think this is an overall really solid movie. The action's pretty entertaining, the comedy's great, the characters are likable, the world is interesting, the story's pretty solid. Overall, I had a really fun time with this movie, and I really hope this is what the MCU needs to get back on track, because as many people have discussed, they've been in a bit of a rough patch since, well, some would say Endgame, others would say since No Way Home, because, like, so far, the only ones that people have really enjoyed since No Way Home were Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, and Guardians of the Galaxy 3, and I'd say this is about on similar levels with those, and I hope that's what they need in order to find their foot in the door, because I know this is the first time in a while where we've only had one MCU movie in a single year, and yeah, after I know Ant-Man and Wasp: Quantumania underperformed and the Marvels didn't even make its budget back, so it's pretty clear they've got some work to do, and thankfully this seems to be a step in the right direction. I really enjoyed this movie, and if you like the Deadpool movies, I think you'll have a pretty solid time. If you didn't love them though, then this probably isn't going to do anything to persuade you, but either way, I'd recommend checking it out if you're interested. I give Deadpool and Wolverine a solid 8 out of 10.